The West Virginia Organization of Homeowners Associations is a member-run organization committed to improving the management of common interest communities through workshops, seminars, and shared information. A wealth of information can be found at our website, WVOHOA.org. So today we are going to have a speaker. His name is Mr. Norwood Bentley. He is an attorney. He currently works for Berkeley County, West Virginia, as civil work for them. He's going to be discussing today the new West Virginia Code 7-1-3FF, which basically gives the authority of the county commission to regulate unsafe and unsanitary structures and refuge on private land. So, ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce to you Mr. Norwood Bentley.
Thank you. It's been a long day for me, and I'm sure for all of you. My arrival was preceded by my accompaniment with my wife at the barn where she boards her horse. And we do that at 6:30 a.m. every morning. I get to muck the stall and use the wheelbarrows. And you folks from Jefferson County in particular probably know all about that. We put new bedding in the stall, and we make sure the horse is fed and watered, both for the morning and for the evening. However, I have not yet had dinner. So this will be brief and to the point. I spent the last hour or so, just before I left to come over here, talking with the Chief Deputy of Berkeley County about a Freedom of Information Act request for two of our deputies who've been accused of using excessive force. And a lawsuit has been filed by local folks. And so those are the kinds of things that I do. I also work with the Planning Commission and the Engineering Department very closely. So I know a little bit about this. But I am happy to be here, even though I'm hungry. When Nance contacted me about speaking, I didn't hesitate to accept. You appear to have a very active and interested membership, which has grown over the years. You're educating yourselves late on a Wednesday afternoon about what appears to be two very topical subjects. First, the regulation of unsafe or unsanitary structures and refuse on private property, and also the problems resulting from so much rain beginning last spring in 2018 and continuing until yesterday and maybe later tonight. So I knew I was going to have an interested and inquisitive audience tonight. Juries are often neither interested nor inquisitive, so this is a treat for me. No lawyer worth his salt would turn down an invitation to talk to such a group as this. The fallacy in my thought process, however, is that we lawyers sometimes talk ourselves into believing that the audience wants to hear what we have to say at least as much as we like to hear ourselves speak. I hope you learned something tonight which will enlighten you, albeit perhaps not wow you with the idea that West Virginia Code 713FF is going to turn our beloved panhandle into a more pleasant place to live and work and play. I chuckled just a little bit when I saw your agenda and noticed that this is the new West Virginia Code 713FF. This code section was created in 1989 and has been on the books ever since then. Let me say that the latest iteration of 713FF, which was amended in 2018, just last year, is not really much different from the versions which preceded it, or the original, which was adopted, as I indicated, in 1989. For sure, the bill introduced by my very good friend Charles Trump was an improvement, and I thank him for the efforts at making the law more easily read and thus meaningful. But the amendments of 2018 were not substantive. They were, like the previous amendments in 2004 and 2005 and 2009, more stylistic than substantive. The 2018 amendments did the following. And pay close attention to what these important amendments did. First, the code section was amended by substituting used for farm purposes instead of utilized for farm purposes. That was in subsection A. In the first sentence of subsection D, the code was amended to use Arabic numerals 22, 15, 10, rather than the printed words 22, 15, 10. The Arabic numeral 22, 15, A4 to replace the awkward printed words saying the same thing. And the same thing replacing the printed words for Arabic numerals 22C, 4, 10A. The amendment did add the following profound language, and I quote, "Provided that any litter control officer who is trained and certified as a law enforcement officer and whose certification is active has the same authority as any other law enforcement officer to enforce all litter laws in this code," end quote. As though a certified litter control officer would not be able to enforce, for some reason, the same litter laws that other officers of the law enforce every day. The legislature further amended the law by substituting manner that causes for manner as to cause in the second sentence of subsection C. It substituted causing the dwelling for cause such dwelling in F6. It substituted another set of Arabic numerals for the printed description of those numerals. Substituted may receive for have the power and authority to receive. And finally, made stylistic changes. It was this set of amendments which caused you to invite me to speak to you regarding this new version of the law, granting county commissions or councils plenary power and authority to adopt ordinances regulating unsafe or unsanitary structures and refuse on private lands. And yet, let me tell you that I have some doubt that these same amendments, as insignificant as they are, would pass in this year's legislature. I just read this morning a survey in which, and this is the God's honest truth, a majority of those surveyed were against schools teaching Arabic numerals. That, folks, is where we are in America today. Senator Trump may want to be more careful this year with his use of Arabic numerals. But in a more serious vein, this section of our law is much needed. As you know, the intention of the legislature was to do something constructive and beneficial for us. Let me just read, and you can follow along if you have a copy of the code sections, if you wish to do so. It is fairly concise and forthright. In subsection A, plenary power and authority are hereby conferred upon every county commission, or in the case of Berkeley, county council, to adopt ordinances regulating the repair, alteration, or improvement, or the vacating and closing, or removal, or demolition, or any combination thereof, of any dwellings or other buildings, except for buildings used for farm purposes, on land actually being used for farming, unfit for human habitation due to dilapidation, defects increasing the hazard of fire, accidents, or other calamities, lack of ventilation, light, or sanitary facilities, or any other conditions prevailing in any dwelling or building, whether used for human habitation or not, which would cause the dwellings or other buildings to be unsafe, unsanitary, dangerous, or detrimental to the public safety or welfare, whether the result of natural or man-made force or effect. That's good stuff, huh? Plenary power and authority to adopt ordinances taking care of all those problems. What is plenary power and authority? According to Black's Law Dictionary, plenary means full, entire, complete, absolute, perfect, unqualified. Plenary power is defined as authority and power as broad as is required in any given case. So everything the county commission needs to accomplish the task at hand, to resolve these problems that homeowners have in West Virginia. Subsection B, plenary power and authority are hereby conferred upon every county commission to adopt ordinances regulating the removal and cleanup of any accumulation of refuse or debris, overgrown vegetation, or toxic spillage or toxic seepage located on private lands which is determined to be unsafe, unsanitary, dangerous, or detrimental to the public safety or welfare, whether the result of natural or man-made force or effect. In C, the legislature commands that if a county commission adopts such an ordinance, it must designate an enforcement agency. In D, power to issue citations for open dumps, for the unlawful disposal of litter, and for the failure to provide proof of proper disposal of solid waste. In E, our ordinances must provide for fair and equitable rules of procedure and standards to guide the enforcement agency, and it requires that any entrance upon premises for the purpose of making examinations shall be made in a manner that causes the least possible inconvenience to the persons in possession of the property. In F, the code provides for complaints to the county commission by citations issued by the county litter control officer or by petition of some competent official like the engineer right next to me on behalf of the agency that we've established after the agency has investigated the complaint and determined that there are problems such as those that the two first paragraphs talked about that you want to resolve. The county commission, in 2, shall cause the owner or owners of the private land in question to be served with a copy of the complaint. Service shall be accomplished in the manner provided in Rule 4 of the Rules of Civil Procedure. So there is some formality to this process. The complaint shall state the findings and recommendations of the enforcement agency, and that unless the owner or owners of the property file with the clerk of the county commission a written request for a hearing within 10 days of receipt of the complaint, an order will be issued by the county commission implementing the recommendations of the enforcement agency. Now, this is all with the staff you have, who several people in this room can tell you are extremely busy people. If the owner or owners of the property file a request for hearing, the county commission shall issue an order setting the matter down for hearing within 20 days. Hearings shall be recorded by electronic device and shall be preserved for appeal. The enforcement agency has the burden of proving its allegations by a preponderance of evidence. At the conclusion of the hearing, the county commission shall make findings of fact, determinations, and conclusions of law as to whether the dwelling or building is unfit for human habitation due to dilapidation, has defects that increase the hazard of fire, accidents, or other calamities, lacks ventilation, light, or sanitary facilities, or any other conditions prevailing in the dwelling at the time. So it takes some time. We have to go through the procedures. We have to give notice. We serve these owners according to law. And I can tell you that if the owner happens to be out of state, and there are many owners of properties who live out of state, serving them is not an easy task. Sometimes it's almost impossible. Sometimes it is impossible. The county commission, though, has been given authority by the legislature to order the owner or owners thereof to repair, alter, improve, vacate, remove, close, clean up, or demolish the dwelling or building in question, or to remove or clean up any accumulation of refuse or debris, overgrown vegetation, or toxic spillage, or toxic seepage within a reasonable time, and to impose daily civil monetary penalties on the owner or owners who fail to obey an order. Appeals are to the circuit court according to law. If an owner fails to obey the order given by the county commission, the county commission may advertise for and seek contractors to make ordered repairs, alterations, or improvements, or the ordered demolition, removal, and cleanup. The county commission may enter into any contract with any contractor to accomplish the ordered repairs, alterations, or improvements, or the ordered demolition, removal, or cleanup. A civil proceeding may be brought. In other words, the county commission can bring an action in the circuit court against the owner or owners of the private land or other responsible party that the subject matter of the order of the county commission is subject to the land in question, to a lien for the amount of the contractor's cost in making these ordered repairs, alterations, improvements, and so forth, to order and decree the sale of the private land in question to satisfy the lien, to order and decree the contractor may enter upon the private land in question at any time and make sure things are happening as they should, and to order the payment of all costs incurred by the county with respect to the property and for reasonable attorney fees. And the last subsection, I, says county commissions may receive and accept grants, subsidies, donations, and services in kind consistent with the objectives of this section. So what sounds really good until you get to I. That's where plenary power and authority ends. What does it cost to tear a dilapidated house down and haul the debris away? Or to remove toxic spillage and dispose of it properly according to the rules established by the Department of Environmental Protection and the EPA. Or to clean up a rat-infested garbage dump at a house owned by someone out of state with squatters inhabiting it. The legislature provided no revenue for county commissions to enforce the rules. It says we can accept grants and subsidies, donations, and in-kind services. We can't impose taxes. We can impose some civil penalties if we can serve the owners, which service also costs money. If they take the county council or the county commission to court in an appeal, which costs both time and money, the violator can stretch the matter out for months or years. As for citations for overgrown home sites or junked up properties or homes covered in undisposed of garbage, you can't get blood out of a turnip. Some pay, some clean up the problem, but most people who live in a trash-infested home, let's face it, they cannot afford to clean it up or to demolish it or to find out what the rules are from the EPA so that they can get rid of toxic waste. And they can't afford to pay civil penalties. I know this because Berkeley County established the agency several years ago. We had a litter control officer who issued citations. We brought people before the county commission in hearings. Now, sometimes it works. Sometimes folks do what you point out to them needs to be done. We cleaned up some properties, but very few. It is a wonderful bill, but it lacks the one good tool to allow the county commissions of this state to enforce it. And that's revenue, a revenue source to make it work. We set aside, the Berkeley County Council Commission at the time, set aside $30,000 to demolish buildings that might need to be demolished. Our first bid exceeded that amount for demolishing a house. So the county, which is in the position of having to retain the services of a contractor to accomplish the task of making things better, also has the responsibility of paying that contractor, advancing the money to the contractor to do the job. And then the taxpayers, hopefully, will be reimbursed at some later date. When the property sells, if it sells, when we can serve the owner, if we can find him. It it looks like a great piece of legislation. It is helpful, but it's not going to do what you and I hoped it would do until the legislature decides it ought to help us foot the bill or give us the authority to raise some revenue. Counties don't have home rule in West Virginia. Some cities do, but they're about to lose it because the current legislature does not like anybody to impose taxes on the people in this state. And I don't like to pay taxes any more than anybody else. So it's good to be careful about that. But if you're going to give the responsibility to county commissions to clean up their counties, to take care of the safety and welfare of the folks who live in subdivisions or who live out in the county outside of a subdivision, then you have to provide the tools. In West Virginia, counties can't do anything that isn't expressly granted to them by the legislature or flows from something they've granted you directly. And this makes it extremely difficult for county commissions. Now, as I indicated, there are things you can do, the county commission can do, that doesn't cost a whole lot of money. If you can serve these people and bring them in and persuade them that, you know, you really ought to clean this mess up. Your neighbors don't like it. We don't like it. Sometimes that works. We got a number of folks to come in and admit that they were wrong and do it. So I'm not saying the county commission in Jefferson County or the county council in Berkeley or wherever it might be shouldn't establish one of these agencies, but it's a whole lot of work for those people. There are a list of people who need to be members of the agency for enforcement that you establish. The engineer, the sheriff is a member. There are lots of those people, and they have jobs to do every day already. But in Berkeley County, they made time. They came to the meetings, they held hearings, and sometimes they were successful. But if you did a study of whether it was cost effective to do all that, whether we're spending the taxpayers' money carefully, you might wonder, is it worth it? It would be worth it if we had the money to make it work. If we could put aside $1 million and demolish some structures or clean them up, take the garbage out of people's yards, take the old things that hoarders in subdivisions sometimes have all around their yards and in their homes, and clean those up. They try to hide them under unsightly tarps. Sometimes they don't even try to hide them. So it's a big problem, and it's a problem that this code section does not really resolve. It's a good start, but it's people like you who need to call your local delegates and senators up and say, look, 713FF is a good start, but you all didn't go far enough. How do you expect the county commission to afford to do this job without giving them some help. When you indicate that we've given you plenary power and authority, they really haven't given that to county commissions. They've told us what they want to do, what we ought to do, but they haven't provided a tool. Yes, sir.
I've got a question. If you can't answer, maybe Mr. Stansbury could, but in Berkeley and Jefferson County, does the county operate any of its own solid waste disposal facilities, transfer station, landfill, or anything, or it's all private?
Both counties, as a matter of fact, all counties in the state have a solid waste authority.
Yeah.
That authority, in some cases, does operate the system, but both Berkeley and Jefferson had yielded their dumps to solid waste. So
Okay.
to the private.
I did code enforcement for 24 years in Fairfax County. The solid waste programs in Fairfax, of course, we're an enterprise fund and a lot larger county, a lot of revenue. So actually, we turn a profit. But for these types of problems, I just see your system here being very, very cumbersome. And basically, the way we did it, we used the Boca Property Maintenance Code, and we just had a task force that's put together between the County Engineering Department, Public Utilities, Health Department, Fire Marshal, Police, and Solid Waste Division, Public Works, and we would train folks from the HOAs as far as what the primary indicators were for them to look at. They would photograph the properties, email us the photos with the date stamp. County inspector would go out and validate it, and then basically if it met those criteria, they post the premises with like a door hanger, very much like a traffic ticket, and they were given 10 days to clean up the property. And if it wasn't cleaned up, then basically they would notify Public Works, and we'd have one of our contractors go pick it up, and we'd send them the bill. And they could pay for it on their Visa, American Express, MasterCard, or Discover, and if it wasn't paid within 60 days, then we go to the county attorney and have it filed as a lien against the property. And we did thousands of these.
Yep. And that works in a big, busy place.
City of Alexandria would do this.
Our problem here in the Panhandle is that we don't have, Berkeley's got 120,000 people, but the other two counties are not as populous.
The key is that you don't manage your own municipal.
That's right, we don't.
Your landfill and whatever, because basically all of our solid waste programs are self-supporting. We didn't use 1 penny of tax dollars. It was an enterprise fund. We actually turned a profit.
Right, it's a good idea.
So I appreciate that legally there's some issues, but emotionally, I've been very successful with this. And I've put over started with a dozen people in my community through this process. We've gotten 3 homes torn down with dilapidated, abandoned homes. We've had 4 homes pick up their green trash bags and sign up for weekly trash service. And we've had some others where we got rid of their 99 unregistered vehicles. So while I appreciate that maybe the county can't enforce it if somebody said, screw you. But the truth is, most of these people don't know that that's a problem. They don't know that the county can't really enforce it. When the county writes them a letter, when the county threatens that we're going to put you through violation, we're going to leave your home, whatever, these people all stood up and said, okay, I better do something about it. So I don't think that we should say, I think that the burden here is for us to use this. And the county, at least I'm in Jefferson County, has been awesome about pushing through, not saying to the people, well, they've been standing there doing the inspections and telling them, no, you've got to do this, you've got to get rid of your pig, and they've stood up to this, and our residents are doing something about it.
We haven't had one resident say, take me to court.
Well, you're very fortunate. We actually ran the program for about 5 years. And we did, as I indicated, have some successes where people did as Jefferson Countyans are doing. But we had many, many others who did say, I can't do that. I can't afford to have it hauled away. I can't. Do you have family that can help you? Do you have friends who can help you? We attempted during that period to cajole people into doing it, and we were successful with some of the smaller projects, but we weren't successful in demolishing large homes. I think we did send the facilities department out one time to demolish a shed, but it's the dangerous old homes that you see on the byways in these 3 counties in the Panhandle, where kids go in or others go in, but the county can't either locate the owner. We had an owner of some property in a really nice subdivision right on the Potomac River. But the house was allowed to fall down. The owner lived in Baltimore. And we tried for 2 years to do something with that. Finally, we got somebody to come in and buy the house from the owner. He persuaded the owner to sell it to him at a price. It was more than he should have had to pay, because he had to then tear down the building was on it and build his new home. But and I agree with you, and that's why I said, let's not throw it away. There are some things we can do with it, but if you expect that this is going to solve the problem in Jefferson or Berkeley or Morgan counties, it's not until we get some new idea, new way of doing it, or a revenue stream to do the job for us. So I admire you and I applaud you for what you're doing.
One of the things which was helpful for us, particularly with the hoarding houses, was we used the fire marshal. Because a lot of these, you had folks that were using, like extension cords and temporary wiring instead of permanent wiring. You had improper storage of combustibles and hazardous material. We did have a couple of fires and hoarding houses, where there are fatalities. Because fires get started under these conditions. I mean, we had one place that we had to approach as both a hazardous material and a confined space response, because when the fire department did initial size up of the basement, just because of all the stuff that was decomposing in the basements, the methane levels were getting at the lower explosive limit. So we had to vent the roof and do positive pressure ventilation before we could even send somebody in there to size up. And we, of course, the county is large as Fairfax, where you have a population of, almost 1 million people. Basically, at any one time, you probably got several hundred houses like that. You just don't know where they are yet. But we handle dozens of them.
Right. And you do, go ahead.
I'd like to add, we're statewide. The organization is statewide now. Hampshire and Tucker emailed the organization with a tip of how they're having success with this law. They don't say that there isn't enough money to support this law. They keep an eye on the property that they're concerned with, and if they see a child repetitively in and out, under the age of 18, they call the health department. The health department has helped Tucker and Hampshire County get these houses cleaned up. That law is a good law. But to say, well, folks, sorry, we can't do anything because we don't have funding. There's ways to use that law.
Yes.
To protect the livelihood of the people their children, right? The firemen that have to go in these homes or on the property. So there is a mechanism.
Oh, I agree 100% that what's there is pretty good. And we adopted it. I think all counties ought to adopt it and establish an agency if they can do that. What I'm saying is, for the big problems, if in Romney, if there's a house on the corner and they know who owns it and they see these things happening, it's possible to do something about it, maybe. We have a huge number in Berkeley County. I don't know how it is in Jefferson. We have a huge number of out-of-state ownership. It's almost like southern West Virginia with the coal industry. All the owners live in Pittsburgh and Cleveland. We have a terrific problem. Now, we were able, and we still are able, our engineering department uses the codes, BOCA and other codes, and they inspect and they issue citations and they accomplish a great deal about cleaning things up outside of this law and the ordinance that exists in Berkeley County. But there are still things, big things, that I don't want anybody to be misled that we can take care of those big things. We can take care of a lot of smaller things and some big things. If you work on, you know the people, if they're your neighbors, and you can persuade them to do it or put pressure on them to do it by putting liens on the house. But the only way you're going to put a lien on the house is if you go in and do the work and you pay somebody to do that. The county commissioners over here in Jefferson are not going to do that themselves, and the county council people in Berkeley are not going to do it. We have to hire contractors.
So, two questions.
One is, can the HOA pay for the destruction of the structure? And the county reimburse them when the lien, the county places a lien and pays it back?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
That's all under that liens or whatever.
That's right.
Donations.
Yeah, donations, we can accept those things. You can become a contractor, sure, absolutely. We would accept that in a minute.
So the other question I had is, which supersedes, I understand I'm told, I haven't researched it, but I'm told by a neighbor that Jefferson County has a ordinance that allows you to have as much as a quarter acre of
debris, salvage, junk, whatever you want to call it. And I'm part of County Berkeley, so I've actually, one of the county officials actually said that.
What do you mean by that? Quarter acre of?
They said you could have a quarter acre of junk, including green trash bags.
There's ordinances that's in Jefferson County that state that. You can look it up online.
So which supersedes,
Does this law overwhelm that?
State law trumps.
I thought so.
Well, I'll tell you what trumps in subdivisions. Subdivision covenants and restrictions trump. If it doesn't, it should have.
But what authority do HOAs have to enforce their covenants? Because that's the issue we run into, we can go to court.
You do have to pay for attorneys, but I can tell you that the circuit judges in this circuit have not been hesitant to enforce the covenants of subdivisions.
Norwood, Berkeley used to have a lady who ran, I think, some kind of litter complaints. They eliminated her job, and did they give that to a sheriff's deputy?
We do have a sheriff's deputy who is assigned as the litter control officer.
Is he still?
He is. Ron Gardner was. I'm not sure if he still is or not.
Ron Pearson, his office, I've talked to recently, because he's worked with us on a couple of properties.
Yeah.
At least we're trying to get some voluntary compliance, being
So do
somewhat
they-
successful.
So do they still have a complaint form that you
Yes.
can fill out in Berkeley County?
Yeah, you can still do that online.
Yes, we do. Did you have a question
No, I just want to
or a comment?
comment. I used to be the prosecutor in Jefferson County. Only 3 or 4 times we tried to enforce what you're talking about. But we did it under the criminal code. Same inspector, and we had to send a deputy up, and they had to go up at least 2 or 3 times to tell the person to clean it up. And they had to document it, show there was more than just building supplies they were going to use for their own house. So that's always the excuse. I'm going to rebuild my house, and we documented, and we usually got them to plead guilty, but that didn't end everything, because you still had we didn't have a way to pay for a garbage truck to go up and pick up all the stuff. Had the inspector and deputy had to go up once a week and make sure that he moved something. Because if you just asked them every day, oh yeah, I did, they had to go up and make sure piles were disappearing. And it took a while. It wasn't, and if you think, I don't know about, I don't think we ever had, I don't know who's saying quarter acre, but they do have to show it's more than just their standard building supplies they're going to use for their house. You got to actually show, for the criminal land, you actually have to show it's a dump.
Also too, just Fairfax, we ran into the same problem, and actually we used the building department on that, because any of their material stockpiles and whatever had to be, on the grading plan, it had to be in compliance with the approved plan, and if they don't have an approved grading plan, with their storage areas and whatever, I think it was a class 1 misdemeanor, and we did, do those criminal.
Right. Did you have a comment on that? No? It's nice to see you again. In a different form.
I was a little delayed with some repairs to my home. So I apologize.
You have an excuse.
What if the contract, what if the violator is a contractor or a developer of a subdivision? The county's notified of, say, like, not quite an illegal dumping, but construction demolition being put in place on a part of the subdivision. Why does the county continue to allow that developer to build homes? Put a stop work order on all his properties until he complies with the
Well,
subdivision.
it's,
2004 subdivision.
Bond as part of the contract, to make sure that debris properly handled, because they should be.
right. We do bond those things, as you know. And in your subdivision over in Berkeley County, we have had the problem that you just described. And it has continued until we met when? Last week or early this week. And I think that you will see bonds being called shortly if the work isn't done immediately.
And Mr. Stansbury should be able to tell you that the bonding amount that's available in this subdivision is probably going to be about half what's needed to fix the damage done to the base roads.
Well,
To finish them.
Well, we have asked for an appraisal, an estimate from contractors, and I think we'll resolve that problem shortly.
I sincerely hope so.
We do too. We do too. We have indulged that developer for far too long.
I have a question. I brought our neighborhood covenants with us, and we have some covenants that are vague. They're not very...
That's because the developer wrote them.
Well, we're working on changing them and defining them a little bit better. And so my question is a little bit more broad. And the wording is, abrogation of any covenants herein requires written consent from the owners of 60% of all lots. And my question is, does that, I looked up abrogation, I was not sure what that meant, and it means abolishment?
Abrogation is,
Okay. I apologize. So, so that means abolishment. So does that mean that we can specify the rules, specify the covenants?
well, one thing I promised Nance wouldn't and couldn't do over here tonight, and that is practice law. But I think that what that means is that you can enforce a change in what you're doing and the way you're doing it, yes.
Okay. And when you said that, you know, that the county can't necessarily back it up, if we don't have problems with structures that need to be demolished, but we do have some issues with a couple of lot owners who have collections.
Any individual homeowner in a subdivision, in a homeowners association, or the homeowners association itself can bring a complaint against another homeowner in the circuit court of this, if you're living in Jefferson County, if you live in Berkeley, obviously Berkeley County. And you will find that the circuit judges in these three counties do enforce the covenants.
Okay, one last thing. We've got a comment from Mr. Sussman here, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up, take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to move into the next session. So,
just in brief, I'm not 100% familiar with Jefferson County's ordinances, but I found a reference, and it's the salvage yard ordinance, Jefferson County, adopted August 23rd, 1984, effective same day. Now, mind you, if you start reading it and going into the definitions, you'll see it's distinguishing between what requires a license to operate a salvage yard and at what point does enough junk become a salvage yard. It does not state in the definitions that you can't have, or you can have up to a quarter acre of junk. It says once you reach that point, you have to have a license to operate a junk yard. So don't read into things that aren't there, so be careful. Read the definitions. It simply says if you have a quarter acre, you have to have a junkyard license, unless you're a public operator, county, etc., solid waste authority. But anything below that, that ordinance is exempting, so it means that ordinance does not apply. So it's not conflicting with 7.1. 3FF. So don't read into it.
And remember, those of you who are fortunate enough to live in Jefferson County with zoning, that zoning also plays a part. There are not very many subdivisions or urban areas of the county that can be a salvage yard in Jefferson County. We don't have that protection over in Berkeley County. Yes, we do.
So I want to wrap that up now. I want you guys to give a big round of applause to Mr. Norwood Bentley.